In 1960, a young psychologist at University College London named Peter Wason placed a simple puzzle in front of his students that would expose one of the deepest flaws in human reasoning. He told them he had a rule in mind that governed sequences of 3 numbers. He gave them one example that followed the rule: 2, 4, 6. Their task was to discover the rule by proposing their own sequences of 3 numbers. For each sequence, Wason would tell them whether it fit the rule or not. When they were confident they knew the rule, they could announce it. Nearly every student formed the same hypothesis immediately. The rule is ascending even numbers. They tested sequences like 4, 6, 8. Yes, that fits. 8, 10, 12. Yes. 20, 22, 24. Yes. Confident, they announced the rule: ascending even numbers. They were wrong. The actual rule was simply any 3 ascending numbers. 1, 2, 3 fits. 5, 19, 800 fits. -7, 0, 1 million fits. The rule was far broader than anyone guessed. But here is what made the experiment devastating. The vast majority of students never tested a sequence that would have disproved their hypothesis. Fewer than 1 in 4 got the right answer on their first attempt. Nobody tried 2, 4, 5. Which would have been confirmed by the real rule, revealing that even numbers were irrelevant. Nobody tried 1, 2, 3. Nobody tried 10, 20, 50. They only tested sequences they expected to succeed. They sought confirmation. They never sought disconfirmation. And their hypothesis, though wrong, was reinforced by every test they ran, because they only ran tests that could not possibly prove them wrong. Wason called this confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms your existing beliefs, while systematically ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts them. It is not a minor quirk. It is the operating system of human belief, and it shapes everything from which news articles you read, to which medical diagnosis your doctor gives you, to which person you marry, to which investment you hold, while it destroys your savings. To understand why confirmation bias exists, return to the ancestral environment. A hunter on the African savanna sees a rustling in the tall grass. He has 2 hypotheses: it is wind or it is a lion. He believes it is a lion. He searches for confirming evidence. Does the rustling follow a pattern? Is it moving toward him? Are the birds silent? If he finds confirming evidence and acts on it, running away, the cost of being wrong is trivial, a few wasted calories. But if he searches for disconfirming evidence and succeeds, it was just the wind, and then relaxes, he is exposed to the catastrophic cost of being wrong in the other direction. If it actually was a lion, he is dead. Evolution rewarded the confirmation bias. The ancestors who looked for evidence that their fears were justified survived. The ancestors who looked for evidence that their fears were unfounded were eaten. We are the descendants of the paranoid confirmers. Our brains are wired to find what we are looking for and to stop looking the moment we find it. A hospital in the 1990s. A patient arrives with chest pain, shortness of breath, and fatigue. The attending physician, experienced, well-trained, forms an initial hypothesis within minutes: heart disease. The patient is male, overweight, in his 50s. The pattern matches. The doctor orders an EKG. The results are ambiguous. Some irregularity, but nothing conclusive. The doctor interprets the ambiguity as consistent with heart disease. A stress test is ordered. The results are borderline. The doctor notes the data points that support the cardiac hypothesis and mentally discounts the ones that do not. The patient is treated for heart disease. The actual cause of the symptoms, a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lungs, is missed. The patient deteriorates. Medical researchers call this anchoring on the initial diagnosis, but it is confirmation bias in clinical clothing. Once the doctor formed a hypothesis, every subsequent piece of evidence was filtered through it. Confirming data was noticed and weighted heavily. Disconfirming data was noticed and dismissed as noise. A landmark study published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine found that diagnostic errors contribute to approximately 10% of patient deaths and up to 17% of adverse events in hospitals. A significant proportion of these errors involve premature closure, the physician settling on a diagnosis too early and then seeking confirming evidence rather than testing alternative hypotheses. The solution, taught increasingly in medical schools under the name diagnostic timeout, forces physicians to pause at a specific point in the evaluation and explicitly generate a list of alternative diagnoses that could explain the same symptoms. The protocol works because it structurally counteracts confirmation bias. It forces the brain to look for the sequences it does not want to test. The criminal justice system is haunted by confirmation bias at every stage. A detective investigating a murder develops a suspect based on early evidence, a neighbor with a prior arrest, a witness who saw someone matching a vague description. The detective's hypothesis crystallizes. This is the person. From that moment, the investigation narrows. Evidence that supports the hypothesis is collected carefully and documented. Evidence that contradicts it, an alibi that checks out, DNA that does not match, a timeline that does not work, is treated with suspicion, set aside, or actively explained away. The alibi witness is lying. The DNA was contaminated. The timeline has gaps. The Innocence Project, which uses DNA evidence to exonerate wrongly convicted individuals in the United States, has documented this pattern in case after case. As of 2024, over 375 people have been exonerated by DNA evidence, many after spending decades in prison. In a substantial number of these cases, the original investigation was marked by tunnel vision. Detectives who formed an early hypothesis and filtered all subsequent evidence through it. Prosecutors whose professional success is measured by conviction rates face their own confirmation bias. Once they believe a defendant is guilty, they interpret ambiguous evidence as incriminating, dismiss defense arguments as desperate, and present the strongest possible one-sided narrative to the jury. The adversarial system is supposed to counteract this. The defense attorney provides the disconfirming evidence, but the system depends on both sides having equal resources, which they rarely do. A wrongly convicted person sitting in a prison cell is the most extreme consequence of a confirmation bias that began as a detective's hunch and was never subjected to a serious disconfirmation test. The financial markets are a confirmation bias laboratory running at global scale 24 hours a day. An investor buys a stock based on a thesis. The company is undervalued. The product is revolutionary. The market is wrong. From the moment of purchase, the investor begins seeking confirming evidence. They read articles praising the company. They join online forums where other shareholders share optimistic analyses. They follow analysts who rate the stock a buy. When negative news appears, a disappointing earnings report, a product recall, a competitor gaining market share, the investor reinterprets it through the confirming lens. The earnings miss was due to one-time charges. The recall is being overblown by the media. The competitor's product is inferior in ways the market doesn't understand yet. The stock declines. The investor holds. The stock declines further. The investor buys more, doubling down on the thesis. The online forum provides an echo chamber of confirming interpretations. The investor is now deep underwater, holding a position that a neutral observer would have exited months ago. Behavioral finance researchers have documented this pattern across millions of individual trading accounts. A 2009 study by Park, Konana, and Gu found that investors preferentially sought information from sources that agreed with their existing positions and systematically avoided sources that challenged them. The more committed the investor was to a position, the stronger the confirmation bias became. This is the mechanism behind every catastrophic individual investment loss where an intelligent person held a collapsing stock all the way to zero, insisting at every stage that the market was wrong and they were right. Social media has industrialized confirmation bias at a scale Wasson could never have imagined. Every major social media platform uses algorithmic content curation, machine learning systems that observe what you click, what you read, what you share, and what you ignore, and then serve you more of what you engage with. If you click on an article arguing that a particular economic policy is harmful, the algorithm notes your engagement and serves you 3 more articles making the same argument. You click those. It serves you 10 more. Within days, your feed is a wall of confirming evidence for a position you may have only tentatively held when you clicked the first article. The algorithm does not have an ideological agenda. It has an engagement agenda. And confirmation bias is the most reliable engagement driver in existence. People spend more time reading content that agrees with them, share it more often, and react to it more intensely. The algorithm exploits this by building you a personalized confirmation chamber and then locking you inside it. Researcher Eli Pariser named this phenomenon the filter bubble in his 2011 book. He documented how 2 people searching for the same term on the same search engine received dramatically different results based on their prior browsing history. The internet was not showing people the world, it was showing each person a customized version of the world that confirmed what they already believed. The political consequences are measurable. A 2020 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that exposure to algorithmically curated news feeds increased political polarization, not by exposing people to extreme content, but by systematically reducing their exposure to disconfirming viewpoints. People did not become more extreme because they encountered radical ideas. They became more extreme because they stopped encountering moderate ones. The climate change debate illustrates confirmation bias operating at civilizational scale. The scientific consensus is overwhelming. Over 97% of actively publishing climate scientists agree that human-caused climate change is occurring. But a significant portion of the public in several countries remains skeptical. This is not because skeptics have not encountered the evidence. Many have encountered extensive evidence. But confirmation bias causes them to weight the 3% of dissenting scientists as heavily as the 97% of confirming ones, because the dissent confirms their pre-existing belief and the consensus contradicts it. A climate skeptic reading a news article about a record-breaking heat wave will look for the paragraph that mentions natural climate variability, and will remember that paragraph while forgetting the 9 paragraphs documenting the human contribution. A climate advocate reading the same article will do the opposite, remembering the human contribution data and dismissing the natural variability caveat. Both readers finished the same article. Both walked away more convinced of what they already believed. The article did not inform them. It was filtered through them. The hiring process in corporations is saturated with confirmation bias in ways that perpetuate homogeneity and exclude talent. A hiring manager reviews a resume and forms an impression within seconds. Research by Ladders, Inc. found that recruiters spend an average of 7.4 seconds on an initial resume review. In those 7 seconds, a hypothesis forms: strong candidate or weak candidate. The subsequent interview is then conducted through the lens of that hypothesis. If the initial impression was positive, the interviewer asks easier questions, interprets ambiguous answers favorably, and remembers the candidate's strengths while forgetting their weaknesses. If the initial impression was negative, the interview becomes an obstacle course: harder questions, skeptical interpretations, and a memory biased toward the candidate's worst moments. Structured interview protocols, where every candidate is asked the same questions in the same order and scored on predetermined criteria, were developed specifically to counteract this dynamic. Companies that adopt structured interviews consistently report better hiring outcomes. But the majority of organizations still use unstructured interviews because the hiring manager's gut feeling, their confirmation-biased initial impression, feels more authentic than a standardized process. Relationships are shaped by confirmation bias in ways that can be either bonding or destructive. In the early stages of a romantic relationship, confirmation bias is your ally. You notice everything wonderful about your partner and filter out the minor irritations. The bias creates a halo effect that facilitates attachment. But when a relationship deteriorates, the same mechanism reverses with devastating efficiency. Once you begin to believe your partner is selfish, every ambiguous action is interpreted as evidence of selfishness. They forgot to buy milk, selfishness. They were quiet at dinner, selfishness. They gave you a gift you did not like. Even this is reinterpreted as evidence that they do not understand you, which is further evidence of selfishness. Marriage counselors report that by the time couples seek therapy, both partners have often constructed airtight confirmation-biased narratives about each other that are virtually impossible to penetrate. Each partner can cite dozens of examples supporting their negative interpretation because their memory has been selectively storing confirming evidence for months or years. The therapeutic intervention is, at its core, a disconfirmation exercise, forcing each partner to identify specific instances that contradict their narrative. Can you think of a time when your partner was genuinely generous? The answer is almost always yes. But the confirming bias had buried those memories beneath an avalanche of evidence that supported the negative thesis. Science itself, the discipline supposedly designed to eliminate bias, struggles with confirmation bias in ways that shape which discoveries are made and which are buried. Researchers design experiments to test their hypotheses, but the hypotheses they choose to test are shaped by what they already believe. A scientist who believes a particular drug works will design a study optimized to detect the effect, choosing favorable patient populations, selecting endpoints that are more likely to show improvement, and interpreting borderline results as positive. The peer review system is supposed to counteract this, but reviewers are also subject to confirmation bias. A reviewer who agrees with a paper's conclusions evaluates its methodology less critically than a reviewer who disagrees. Studies that confirm the prevailing paradigm pass through review more easily than studies that challenge it. This is one of the reasons the replication crisis has shaken multiple scientific fields: psychology, medicine, economics. Many landmark findings, when subjected to rigorous replication attempts, failed to reproduce. The original results were real in the sense that they emerged from real data, but they were inflated by researchers who unconsciously nudged their analyses toward confirming what they expected to find. So how do you fight a bias that operates at the level of perception itself, that filters what you see, what you remember, and what you believe before your conscious mind even has a chance to evaluate the evidence? The first and most powerful defense is to actively seek disconfirmation. Before making any important decision, Force yourself to answer one question. What evidence would change my mind? If you cannot articulate what would change your mind, you do not hold a belief. You hold a conviction, and convictions are immune to evidence by definition. The second defense is to deliberately consume information from sources you disagree with, not to be persuaded by them, but to stress test your own position. If your thesis survives contact with the strongest opposing argument, it is probably sound. If you have never encountered the strongest opposing argument, you do not actually know how strong your thesis is. The third defense is to adopt the practice of steel manning, articulating the strongest possible version of the opposing view before arguing against it. If you cannot describe your opponent's position in terms they would recognize and accept, you have not understood it. You have only understood the straw man your confirmation bias constructed. And the fourth defense is the simplest and the hardest. Cultivate the habit of saying 3 words that confirmation bias is designed to prevent you from ever saying. I was wrong. Because the most expensive belief you will ever hold is not the one that is wrong. It is the one that is wrong and that you will never test, because every piece of evidence you encounter has been pre-filtered by a brain that decided the answer before the question was asked. Peter Wayson's students sat in a London classroom in 1960, testing 2, 4, 6, and 4, 6, 8, and 8, 10, 12, confirming, confirming, confirming. Almost none of them tried the sequence that would have revealed the truth. The rule was always broader than they imagined. The world is always more complex than the hypothesis. And the evidence you need most is always the evidence you are least inclined to seek. That has not changed in 65 years. It has only gotten more expensive.